You ate well today. You were careful. Smaller portions, nothing too starchy, water instead of juice, and still, somewhere around 3 in the afternoon, it hit you. That heaviness behind the eyes, that thick, slow feeling in your head that makes concentrating feel like pushing through wet sand. Your energy dropped, and you reached for something. Coffee, a cracker, anything. Not because you were hungry, but because your body was sending a signal. You've stopped questioning, because it happens every single day. You've accepted it as just how afternoons feel now. I want to tell you today that you were wrong to accept it. And I'm going to walk you through 7 specific reasons why, and the one seed that addresses all 7 at once. We're going from benefit 7 down to benefit 1, and benefit 1 is the mechanism that explains why everything else on this list works. Stay with me. Let me ask you to picture something before we go any further. Think about the last time you had a day where your energy just worked. Not perfect, not extraordinary, just steady. You ate breakfast and felt satisfied without heaviness. You got to noon without that mid-morning dip that sends you to the coffee machine. You ate lunch and came out the other side of it feeling alert rather than foggy. The afternoon passed without the familiar crash around 3 o'clock that you've come to think of as just part of the day. You slept that night without waking, and in the morning, you felt like the sleep had actually done something. You can probably remember a time like that, maybe years ago, maybe more recently, on a good day. You remember it because it felt like the way things were supposed to feel, and because it contrasts so sharply with how most days feel now. Now let me describe a different kind of day, the kind that has become the norm for a lot of people reading this. You wake up, and the first hour is a fog you push through, rather than climb out of. Breakfast helps, but within 90 minutes there's a subtle restlessness in your energy, a slight edginess or hunger that doesn't quite make sense given when you last ate. You eat at noon, and somewhere between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, your body sends a message that you have learnt to translate as. The message comes through your legs first, then your eyes, then your concentration. You have things to do, you push through it with caffeine or willpower or both. By 5 o'clock, you are genuinely tired in a way that doesn't match the physical effort of your day. And after dinner, there is a second wave of that heavy, slow feeling that makes the couch feel like the only sensible destination. You've probably mentioned some version of this to your doctor. And if you're like most of the patients I've worked with over 30 years, you were told something like, watch your portions, cut back on sugar, get some exercise, maybe your medication needs adjusting, all of which may be true, but none of which addresses the specific mechanical reason why your energy is doing what it is doing after every meal. That reason has a name, it has a mechanism, and once you understand it, that 3 o'clock crash, along with the morning fog, the post-lunch heaviness, the nighttime restlessness, all of it snaps into a pattern that finally makes sense. You are not imagining it, and it is not your fault. Here is the question I want you to hold through this entire video. A question with an answer that genuinely surprised me the first time I fully understood its implications. Most health advice focuses on what you eat. The type of food, the quantity, the timing, the combinations. All of that matters. But there is a layer underneath all of it that almost no nutritional advice ever addresses. And that layer is not about what you eat. It is about how fast what you eat enters your blood. The speed at which glucose moves from your digestive system into your bloodstream determines almost everything about how you feel after a meal. The same amount of glucose, from the same food, consumed at the same time of day, produces completely different effects in your body depending on how quickly it arrives. Fast arrival means a spike, a hormonal overreaction, a crash. Slow arrival means stability, sustained energy, a body that feels like it is working with you rather than against you. If that speed is the variable that matters most, and I will show you today that it is, then the question becomes, is there a simple, practical, inexpensive way to slow that speed down without changing everything else about how you eat? There is, and it fits in a tablespoon. My name is Dr. Jane. I have spent more than 30 years working with patients whose central complaint, underneath everything else, came down to this. Their body was not handling sugar the way it once did, and no one had ever explained to them why. in terms they could actually use. Over those 30 years, I have watched a consistent pattern. The people who struggled most with blood sugar instability were not careless or undisciplined. They were often the most careful, the most attentive, the most willing to do what they were told. What they were missing was not motivation, it was mechanism. They were following advice without understanding the biology underneath it. And advice without mechanism is easy to follow, imperfectly, and easy to abandon when results are slow. Today I want to give you something different. Not just a list of things to do, but a real, plain language understanding of what is happening inside your body after every meal, and how one specific seed, used in one specific way, can intervene in that process at the most important point. We are going to go through 7 distinct benefits, from least to most fundamental. By the time we reach benefit 1, you will understand not just what this seed does, but why it does it, and why getting the method right is the difference between a pleasant nutritional habit and a genuinely effective metabolic intervention. The seed is chia, and everything you thought you knew about how to use it is probably missing the most important part. Before we dive in, if you're finding this useful, take 2 seconds right now, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video, and give this a thumbs up. It genuinely helps more people like you find this content. And drop a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is tuning in from around the world. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Before I give you benefit 7, I want to tell you about Diane. Diane was 64 years old, a retired school administrator from Memphis, Tennessee. She came to see me not because she was in crisis, but because she was exhausted by a pattern she could not break. Every afternoon, without fail, her energy fell off a cliff. She described it as a wall, invisible, predictable, and entirely demoralizing. She had tried eating less at lunch. She had tried eating more protein. She had cut out bread, then reintroduced it, then cut it again. Nothing produced a reliable change. She was meticulous. She brought a food diary. She tracked her sleep. She had done everything her doctor recommended. And still, every day, the wall arrived at 2:30 in the afternoon, and she spent the next 2 hours in a kind of suspended exhaustion that she had started calling lost time. When I asked her how she was consuming chia seeds, because she had been using them for 8 months, having read about them somewhere, she said she put them in her morning smoothie, blended, every single day. I told her that the way she was using them was bypassing the mechanism that makes them effective, not because smoothies are wrong, but because the specific thing chia seeds can do for blood sugar requires a specific preparation that blending destroys entirely. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She said, "You're telling me I've been doing it for 8 months and missing the point?" "Yes," I said, "and I'm going to show you the right way." We will come back to Diane. Her story ends somewhere important. Benefit 7. Omega-3 fatty acids and the inflammation that has been quietly working against you for years. You've probably heard omega-3 mentioned in connection with heart health, fish oil, cholesterol, inflammation in a general sense. All of that is real. But there is a more specific connection between omega-3 fatty acids and blood sugar that most people never hear, and it sits at the very foundation of why glucose management gets harder as we get older. Think of your body's insulin response like a lock and key system. Insulin is the key. The locks are receptors on the surface of your cells, millions of them, on muscle cells, fat cells, liver cells, waiting for insulin to arrive and signal the cell to open its door to glucose. When everything works as designed, the system is elegant. Insulin arrives, the locks turn smoothly, glucose enters the cells, your bloodstream clears, energy is stable. Chronic low-grade inflammation, the kind that builds slowly and invisibly over years, the kind you cannot feel on any given day, makes those locks stiff. The key is still being produced. The signal is still being sent. But the mechanism is sticky, resistant, slow to respond. Insulin has to knock harder and harder to get the same door to open. Your pancreas compensates by producing more insulin. Over time, the cells become even less responsive. The pancreas works harder still. The entire system becomes progressively less efficient. This is called insulin resistance. It is not a diagnosis you necessarily have. It is a spectrum that most adults over 60 are somewhere on, and most of them have no idea, because the early stages produce no dramatic symptoms, only the kind of slow, gradual changes in energy and post-meal recovery that are easy to attribute to aging. Omega-3 fatty acids reduce the specific inflammatory signals that make those cell receptors stiff. They lubricate the mechanism. The key doesn't change. The lock doesn't change. The friction decreases, and the system responds more efficiently. Research has also shown that omega-3s influence the receptors themselves, maintaining their structural sensitivity, so that insulin needs to do less work to produce the same cellular response. Chia seeds are one of the richest plant-based sources of alpha-linolenic acid, the omega-3 that your body uses as the raw material for the anti-inflammatory compounds that perform this function. This benefit is not something you will feel after a single serving. It builds over weeks. But it is building a better biological environment for every other mechanism on this list to operate in. That is benefit 7. Benefit 6. Protein, gastric emptying, and a hormone you may have heard about in a very different context. That afternoon energy crash you know so well, that wall Diane described, is almost always caused by the same sequence. A post-meal glucose spike, followed by an insulin overreaction, followed by a blood sugar drop. The drop is what you feel as the crash. The spike is what caused it. And the spike is determined largely by how fast glucose entered your blood in the first place. One of the most reliable ways to slow that entry is to slow how quickly food leaves your stomach, what doctors call gastric emptying rate. When the stomach holds food longer before releasing it into the small intestine, glucose from that food enters the bloodstream more gradually. No flood, no spike, no overcorrection, no crash. Protein slows gastric emptying. Chia seeds contain a meaningful amount of protein, not as much as a chicken breast, but enough to contribute to this slowing effect when consumed before a meal. And protein triggers something else that is genuinely significant, particularly given what you may have been hearing lately in medical news. The hormone GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, is the hormone that newer classes of diabetes and weight loss medications are designed to mimic. Its natural job is to signal the pancreas to release insulin more slowly and more precisely, rather than in a large sudden burst. It signals the liver to hold back on releasing its stored glucose into the bloodstream after meals. The combined effect is a much smoother, more controlled glucose response, less spike, less overcorrection, less crash. Chia seeds, through their protein content, naturally stimulate some of that GLP-1 pathway, not at the same magnitude as a pharmaceutical dose, but through a real, functional, biological mechanism that your body already has the machinery to use. Here is the part most people never hear. Muscles are one of the primary sites where glucose gets absorbed and burned after meals. When your muscles are metabolically active and well-nourished, they act as a powerful natural sink for post-meal glucose, pulling it out of the bloodstream efficiently. Consistent protein intake is what keeps that muscle machinery primed and responsive. Every tablespoon of chia seeds you consume before a meal is contributing, in a small but real way, to the protein supply that keeps your muscles ready to do that job. That is benefit 6. Benefit 5. Antioxidants, beta cells, and the protection most people are not thinking about yet. This benefit works in the background. You will not feel it on any given afternoon, but it may be the most important benefit for where your blood sugar health is headed 5 or 10 years from now. Think of your pancreas's insulin-producing cells, called beta cells, like the engine of a car that has been running in difficult conditions for a long time. A well-maintained engine in ideal conditions can run for decades. An engine that has been pushed hard, that has been running hot, that has never had the right kind of maintenance, it wears down faster, loses efficiency, and eventually cannot perform at the level the car needs. Every blood sugar spike places oxidative stress on your beta cells. Oxidative stress is what happens when cells are worked hard in an internal environment full of what researchers call free radicals, unstable, reactive molecules that damage cellular structures over time. The pancreas, because of its central role in responding to every glucose fluctuation throughout the day, is one of the tissues most exposed to this kind of cumulative oxidative damage. Antioxidants are the compounds that neutralize free radicals before they can cause that damage. Chia seeds contain several clinically relevant antioxidant compounds. Chlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, and quercetin are among the most studied. Chlorogenic acid, in particular, has a dual relevance for blood sugar. It is both a free radical scavenger that protects beta cells and a direct inhibitor of the intestinal enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars. When those enzymes are partially inhibited, glucose is released more slowly from digested food into the bloodstream. This is a direct blood sugar mechanism, not just a background protective effect. Caffeic acid reduces inflammatory signaling in tissues throughout the body, supporting the same anti-inflammatory environment that the omega-3s are building. Quercetin has been shown in cell studies to improve insulin sensitivity at the receptor level, making those cell locks more responsive to insulin's key. You cannot reverse beta cell damage that has already occurred, but you can slow the accumulation of new damage, and that difference over years is what determines whether your body's insulin-producing capacity holds up as you age or gradually loses ground. That is a long-game benefit, and long-game benefits are the ones that matter most. That is benefit 5. Now we are at the exact midpoint of this countdown, and I want to bring back the question I asked you to hold from the beginning: the speed of glucose absorption. The transition from flood to stream is the central variable. You have been building an understanding of why that variable matters so much. Now I want to add a second question that will carry us through the final 4 benefits and resolve at number 1. Here it is. If the method of preparation determines whether the primary mechanism works at all, what is the method that most people are getting wrong? The answer is coming. Keep going. Benefit 4. Post-meal spike reduction. The clinical evidence and what it tells you about the damage you may not be seeing. Most people with blood sugar concerns track 2 numbers: their fasting morning glucose and their A1C. Both are important. But there is a third measurement, one that most standard lab panels do not capture, that research increasingly identifies as the most significant predictor of long-term cardiovascular and metabolic outcomes. It is the post-meal spike. Imagine your body as a kitchen. Your fasting glucose is the temperature when the oven is completely off, a useful baseline. But if that oven is running at full blast 3 times a day, every day, the wear on the oven accumulates whether or not your baseline temperature looks normal. Your post-meal glucose is the temperature during cooking, and that is where the real wear happens. Multiple clinical trials have examined post-meal blood sugar in people who consumed chia seeds compared to those who did not. The findings are consistent across studies. Chia seeds produce a measurable, statistically significant reduction in the post-meal spike, specifically in the 90-minute to 2-hour window after eating, which is precisely the window where the most cardiovascular and metabolic damage from glucose accumulates. Why does post-meal elevation cause damage? When glucose is elevated in the blood, glucose molecules chemically attach to proteins in the walls of blood vessels, a process called glycation. Glycated vessel walls become stiffer, less elastic, less able to expand and contract with each heartbeat. The heart works harder to push blood through them. Blood pressure rises. The vessels narrow further. The same process that your A1C test is measuring on red blood cells is happening throughout your entire vascular system every time glucose spikes. Researchers have also identified a concept called glucose variability, the degree to which blood sugar fluctuates up and down throughout the day. High variability, even when average levels seem acceptable, is associated with accelerated cellular aging, increased cardiovascular risk, and declining cognitive function. Chia seeds reduce post-meal spikes. Reduced spikes mean lower variability. Lower variability means less cumulative damage to the systems that matter most. Here is one more piece of this that almost no one discusses. Your body's insulin sensitivity follows a daily rhythm. It is significantly higher in the morning than in the evening. The same meal eaten at 7 in the morning produces a smaller blood sugar response than that identical meal eaten at 7 in the evening. This is controlled by your circadian clock, and it means that late evening eating, common for many people, triggers the largest glucose spikes at exactly the time of day when your body is least equipped to handle them. Using chia seeds before your largest evening meal is particularly strategic for this reason. It addresses the spike at the meal where your biological disadvantage is greatest. That is benefit 4. Benefit 3. Blood pressure, vascular health, and the mineral most people over 60 are quietly missing. You might be thinking, I came here for blood sugar. What does blood pressure have to do with it? The answer is that they are not two separate problems that happen to coexist in many people. They are the same underlying problem, expressing itself through two different systems. Think of your blood vessels as garden hoses that have been in use for decades. New hoses are flexible, smooth on the inside, able to expand and contract easily. Over time, in harsh conditions, the rubber stiffens. The inside develops deposits. The flow is restricted. More pressure is needed to push the same volume of water through. That is atherosclerosis, and vascular stiffening and chronic blood sugar elevation is one of the primary conditions that accelerates both the glycation process I described in benefit 4, glucose attaching to proteins in vessel walls, stiffens those walls directly. Chronically elevated blood sugar simultaneously promotes inflammation in vessel walls, which narrows them progressively. Narrower, stiffer vessels require more pressure to perfuse. Blood pressure rises. Higher blood pressure accelerates further damage. The two conditions are locked in a self-reinforcing loop. Chia seeds interrupt this loop through multiple pathways. The omega-3s reduce vascular inflammation. The antioxidant compounds slow the glycation process by helping to clear the glucose that would otherwise be attaching to vessel walls. And there is a specific research finding on chia seeds and blood pressure. Studies have shown measurable decreases in systolic blood pressure after several weeks of consistent daily use, independent of the blood sugar effects. But the piece most people never hear is about minerals. Chia seeds are an excellent source of magnesium. A single tablespoon provides a meaningful contribution toward your daily magnesium requirement. Magnesium plays a direct role in blood vessel relaxation. It helps the smooth muscle tissue in vessel walls release tension, allowing vessels to widen and blood to flow more freely. Low magnesium is one of the most common and most underdiagnosed nutritional deficiencies in adults over 60, particularly in those managing blood sugar challenges, because elevated insulin levels accelerate magnesium excretion through the kidneys. Most people are losing magnesium faster than they are replacing it, and the symptoms of low magnesium, muscle cramps, poor sleep, elevated blood pressure, elevated blood sugar are so common in this population that they rarely get attributed to their actual cause. Chia seeds also contribute meaningfully to your daily potassium and calcium intake, two more minerals that work alongside magnesium to regulate blood pressure and support healthy cardiac function. These are not incidental nutrients. They are clinically relevant contributions to a system that, in most people over 60, is quietly running short. That is benefit 3. Before I tell you about benefit 2, I want to tell you about Raymond. Raymond was 68 years old, a retired logistics coordinator from Cincinnati, Ohio. Methodical, systematic, the kind of man who approached health management the way he had approached his career, with precision and consistency. He had been managing type 2 diabetes for 6 years. His A1C was controlled. His fasting glucose was acceptable. He was doing everything right by the conventional measures. But he felt terrible. Not sick, not in pain, just subtly, persistently wrong, in a way he could not put into words that felt adequate. He said, "My numbers look fine, but I feel like I'm running at 70%, and I don't know what the other 30% is being spent on." When we dug into his post-meal patterns, not his fasting number, not his A1C, but his glucose in the 90 minutes after eating, the picture changed. His post-meal spikes were significant. Every meal, even the careful ones, even the ones where he had done everything correctly by every standard he had been given. He had not been told that post-meal glucose was where most of the damage was accumulating. He had been managing the wrong number. I explained the gel mechanism I am about to explain to you at Benefit 1, and I gave him one specific instruction. 1 tablespoon of chia seeds soaked in a full glass of water, consumed 15 minutes before his largest meal of the day. Not in a smoothie, not sprinkled on yogurt, soaked, gelled, before the meal. He came back in 5 weeks. He had been testing his post-meal glucose carefully, because Raymond was the kind of man who tracked things. His average post-meal reading in the first 2 weeks had been 172. In weeks 4 and 5, it was 131. He sat across from me quietly for a moment. Then he said, "I feel like someone gave me the real instructions." Benefit 2. The energy, cravings, and sleep effects, and why what most people think is willpower is actually biochemistry. This is the benefit most people notice first. And it is important to understand why it happens, because understanding it changes how you think about the cravings and the crashes that have been making your days harder than they need to be. When your post-meal glucose spike is lower, because glucose is entering your blood more slowly, your insulin response is proportionate rather than excessive. There is no overcorrection. There is no sharp drop that follows the spike. Your blood sugar settles into a gradual, manageable arc rather than a peak and crash cycle. That single change cascades through your entire experience of the afternoon. When blood sugar doesn't crash, your body never enters the emergency hormonal state that a sharp glucose drop triggers. The stress hormones that fire in response to that drop, cortisol, adrenaline, stay quiet. The urgent hunger signal that fires when your brain detects falling glucose never activates. The desperate craving for something fast and sweet, which is your body's emergency call for quick glucose, simply doesn't arise with the same intensity. This is the part I say to patients very directly. When you stabilize your post-meal glucose curve, your cravings decrease. Not because you have more willpower, because the physiological condition that creates cravings, the sharp glucose drop, is not occurring. The willpower hasn't changed. The biology has. And changed biology is more reliable than changed willpower every time. There is a sleep dimension to this that most people never connect to: blood sugar. If blood sugar becomes unstable during the night, dropping below a certain threshold and triggering a cortisol response to raise it back up, that cortisol response disrupts the deep stages of sleep. People wake at 2 or 3 in the morning, not because of noise or worry, but because of a metabolic event they cannot feel consciously, but that their body is reacting to. People who stabilize their daytime glucose curve often notice they sleep more soundly within the first 2 weeks. Not because they changed anything about their sleep routine, because the overnight metabolic environment became quieter. Think about that feeling of energy you were trying to remember at the beginning of this video. The day where things just worked. That steadiness, that clarity. That was not luck. That was a day when your blood sugar happened to behave, and your whole experience of the day reflected it. That is what you are working toward. Not a perfect number, a calmer curve. That is benefit 2. And here it is. Benefit 1. The mechanism that explains why every other benefit on this list works, and why the method of preparation is not optional. When chia seeds absorb liquid, they form a gel. You have probably seen this if you have ever soaked them. Within 10 to 15 minutes, the seeds swell dramatically, and the liquid around them thickens into a substance with an almost pudding-like consistency. 1 tablespoon of chia seeds can absorb up to 10 times its own weight in water. Most people experience this texture and think it is a quirk, or they blend it away in a smoothie, or they avoid soaking altogether and just add the seeds dry to food. And in doing so, they bypass the mechanism entirely. Here is what that gel does when it arrives in your digestive system. Your small intestine is where the vast majority of carbohydrate digestion occurs, and where glucose actually crosses from the gut into the bloodstream. When the chia gel is present in this environment, distributed throughout the small intestine before food arrives, it creates a viscous, semi-fluid medium that the digestive process has to work through. The enzymes that break down carbohydrates still function. Your digestion proceeds normally, but movement slows. The rate at which glucose reaches the intestinal wall and crosses into the bloodstream is meaningfully, measurably reduced. The technical terms are reduced intestinal transit rate and reduced glucose diffusion rate. In plain language, things move slower. Glucose arrives in your blood as a stream rather than a flood. Insulin responds proportionately. The spike doesn't happen. The crash doesn't follow. This is the mechanism that benefit 7 through benefit 2 are all building on. The omega-3s reduce the inflammation that makes cells insulin resistant, making them more ready to receive the glucose that the gel is delivering slowly. The protein slows gastric emptying and triggers GLP-1, adding a hormonal layer to the same slowing effect. The antioxidants protect the beta cells that are producing the insulin that will respond to that controlled arrival. The post-meal spike reduction. The clinical evidence is the documented result of the gel doing its job. The blood pressure benefits come in part from the fact that less glucose is spiking through the vessels. The energy, cravings, and sleep effects are the felt experience of a slower, steadier glucose curve. The gel is the foundation. Everything else rests on it. Now here is the critical detail that most people get wrong. The gel must be fully formed before you consume it, and it must be consumed before the meal. Here is why both conditions matter. If you swallow dry chia seeds, the gel forms inside your gut using moisture from your digestive tissues, mixing into the food that is already being digested. The gel is forming late, competing for space with the very glucose it is supposed to be slowing. The mechanism is compromised. If you blend the chia seeds, which destroys the gel structure entirely, there is no gel. You are eating nutritious seeds. But the specific mechanism that changes blood sugar is gone. If you consume the gel at the same time as the meal rather than before it, the gel is mixed into the digestive process rather than preceding it. The protective environment it creates in the small intestine is weakened because it is not already established when the carbohydrates arrive. The sequence is specific, and it matters. 1 tablespoon of chia seeds in a full 8-ounce glass of water. Stir well. Wait 10 to 15 minutes. The gel needs time to fully form. Drink the glass approximately 15 to 20 minutes before your main meal. That is the preparation. That is the timing. That is what makes the mechanism function as intended, rather than as a pleasant but ineffective ritual. There is one more layer to this that most people never hear. The soluble fiber in chia seeds, the mucilage that forms the gel, is a prebiotic. It feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. Those bacteria ferment the fiber and produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate. Butyrate has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in the cells lining the gut, reduce intestinal inflammation, and support the integrity of the gut wall. A compromised gut wall allows inflammatory compounds from the gut's bacterial environment into the bloodstream, compounds that directly worsen insulin resistance. Chia seeds are not just creating a mechanical barrier, they are feeding the ecosystem that supports your metabolic health over the long term. That is benefit 1. And now you have the complete picture. Before the conclusion, I want to come back to Diane from Memphis. The school administrator who had been doing everything right for 8 months and experiencing nothing because she had been blending her chia seeds into a smoothie every morning and bypassing the gel mechanism every single day. She started the correct preparation the week after our conversation. Soaked, gelled, consumed before lunch, because lunch was where her afternoon wall always began. She kept it consistent for 4 weeks before she came back in. She walked in and sat down and said something before I could ask how she was doing. She said, "The wall is gone." Just that. No qualifications. "No, I think it might be getting better." The wall is gone. Her afternoon energy. The things she had been managing around and compensating for and accepting as permanent for years had changed. Not everywhere, not every day, not magically, but the predictable, clock-reliable crash at 2:30 that had been defining the shape of her days had stopped happening with the same certainty. She had time back. The lost time was returning. She had been doing it right for 8 months, she reminded me. Just the wrong right. Think back to how you felt when you pressed play on this video. That 3 o'clock feeling, the wall, the fog that you've been treating as a fixture of your days, the post-meal heaviness that has become so familiar, you stopped registering it as a symptom. Here is what you know now. You know that the speed of glucose absorption is the central variable, that the same food, eaten the same way, produces dramatically different effects in your body depending on how quickly the glucose arrives in your blood. You know that 7 distinct biological mechanisms converge in chia seeds to address that speed and the downstream consequences of getting it wrong. You know that the omega-3s are reducing the inflammation that makes your cells resistant. The protein is triggering GLP-1 and slowing gastric emptying. The antioxidants are protecting the beta cells your pancreas depends on. The post-meal spike reduction is documented in clinical trials and connects to vascular damage, cognitive function, and cellular aging. The mineral content is addressing the magnesium deficit that most people over 60 are quietly carrying. The energy and craving stabilization are direct biochemical consequences of a smoother glucose curve, not willpower improvements. And the gel, fully formed, consumed before the meal, is the physical mechanism that anchors all of it. And you know what Diane didn't know for 8 months? The method is the mechanism. Without the correct preparation, the most important benefit simply does not activate. 1 tablespoon, a full glass of water, 10 to 15 minutes of soaking, 15 to 20 minutes before your main meal, 30 days of consistency. That is the experiment. That is all it asks. Diane got her afternoons back. Raymond got the real instructions. You have them now too. Take good care of yourself. You have earned it. And hey, if you made it all the way here, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know this was worth your time. And leave a comment below. Tell me what country you're watching from. Seriously, I read every single one, and it means a lot to see how far this community reaches. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar? Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called The Glucose Paradox, and inside you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free. You can download it in a second, and it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.